and I was reading a very specific part in a book that was describing some type of haunting that happened to a guest within a bedroom of this like a B&B or a boarding house. And all of a sudden the TV blasts, the volume pops on. The volume is all the way to the absolute max, where I thought the speakers were actually going to blow out. Okay. I've never had that TV that loud before or since.
Probably scared the shit out of you, dude.
It scared the living shit out of me.
I was wondering if, like, right out the gate, let's get out, like, raise your hand if you're a believer. Normally, let's see, like, where the sides are.
I always walk into this shit with open mind, dude, because like I wasn't there, you know. Yeah, it's like every fucked up shit that happens in war too. It's like, you know, you hear this story, I'm like, I wasn't there though, man. So I just so Ed and Lorraine Warren, made famous recent from the Conjuring movies, but very famous in the 80s for their all their different investigations. Anybody want to start with one particularly? Or
I want someone to do intro.
Let's hear it, Mr. Green. You got the book on. Let's hear it.
Yeah, it's been a while since I've read the book, and I'm a huge horror novel fan. I read a lot of scary books, and whether it was true or not, believe what you want, but reading The Demonologist was by far the scariest book I've ever read.
Dude, I gotta get it. I've heard that, man. I gotta get it.
Whether or not you believe it or not, it was written in a way that scared the crap out of me. It was the only book where I legitimately had to stop reading it at night, and I have very bad sleep patterns. So oftentimes I'll be up at like 2 or 3 in the morning. I just can't sleep, and so I'll be awake at night reading. And I had to stop reading it at night, and I was actually only comfortable finishing the book outside in the middle of the day. It was one of those kind of like rare books that is really.
So it's kind of like if Blair Witch Project had a book.
Kind of, and there were some weird things that happened to me while I was reading the book. I don't know if it had anything to do with the book. I don't know. I go into every paranormal thing with I try to be as open-minded as possible. I've had a few of my own personal things. I can't verify that it was yay or nay on anything, but I forgot.
Give us a couple hints or examples of like what kind of things went on while you were reading it.
So while I was reading the book, I forgot what story it was or what investigation it was, but it was an investigation that had to do in part with somebody that owned like a boarding house or Airbnb, not an Airbnb, but like that their version of it, like some type of boarding house or bed and breakfast. And they were describing tenants staying in various rooms and different things happening specifically within the bedrooms. And at that moment, it was about 3 a.m, and I had my TV on, but the sound was on mute and the remote was on the nightstand. And I've had that TV for a while. I never had any problems with it. I was the only person in the room. It was on mute. The remote was right next to me. Nobody was touching it. I didn't have any problems with that TV before that moment or after that moment. That was the single only time I've ever had a problem with it. And I was reading a very specific part in a book that was describing some type of haunting that happened to a guest within a bedroom of this like a B&B or a boarding house. And all of a sudden the TV blasts. The volume pops on. The volume is all the way to the absolute max, where I thought the speakers were actually going to blow out. Okay. I've never had that TV that loud before or since.
Probably scared the shit out of you, dude.
It scared the living shit out of me. And because the whole room was silent, and I look at the remote, I look at the TV, and I grab the remote, turn the volume down, to a safe level.
Went to the bathroom, changed your underwear.
I mean, say what you want, believe what you want, but just in that moment, I'm like, holy shit. It really scared the crap out of you. When you're really deep into a book and something like that happens. And
I have a theory about this, man.
yeah.
Go ahead, Venkman. You started talking for me after you, buddy.
I was just gonna say, now that could be the simplest form of like a coincidence, but also the volume shit on technology, or I should say electronics. Volume going up and down randomly on its own on electronics is probably the most common thing that people experience that will say they had a paranormal experience. And it probably, if it is, let's say that is it, and it's such a wide occurrence, it's probably like that's like the lowest form of a paranormal communication through the television for some reason, because that is said in so many stories I've heard, podcasts I've listened to, like volume and lights going on by themselves, and volume of TV sporadically up and down, loud or off, all the time. People talk about that shit all the time. Now, it could have been just a one-time coincidence in your case, but let's say it's not, because I'm going to say it's not. That's like so common, dude. It's crazy.
It's interesting about, if you know anything about electricity, as if, like, you think about you're switching the light on and off when you do a switch. But if you think about it from like an electrician's point of view, it's actually you're doing the opposite, right? Because actually what when you're switching it off is when you're actually you're breaking the circuit, right? So it's like every time you turn the light on, you're completing the circuit, right? And then you're breaking it and completing it, breaking, completing it, right? And so you think about it that way. So when lights randomly flip on, like that's fucking super fucking weird. I've heard stories about that where like lights just come on and they try to explain it. Water, like everybody's here's probably heard the story at my house, my faucet just turning on randomly, and like that is like
that's a lot different than light.
Yeah, well, even the lights going on, it's like,
but not as different as you'd think, man.
Well, unless you have a faucet that's hooked up to like there are faucets like you push your hand under it, boom, sensor, and it just goes off, right? They have that shit now. Now, if it's that, yeah, I can get it, right? But faucet's mechanical. It's not electrical, right? So like mechanical is very different. There's physical, something has to happen for that to happen, like a break in the pipe, whatever the fuck, turn the handle, you know what I'm saying?
Well, so with the lights though too, if you like look at
like saying that's kind of the same, dude. Light switches is like it ain't just gonna
a light switch for sure.
Yeah. And if you look at it from, it's almost like connections being created or now if you're looking at like one that's a little easier, if you're going to be in a debunking standpoint, flickering lights, easy, because there's a million reasons why lights will flicker, and also like bulbs blowing out at coincidental times. Another one, like many people I know, and myself included, have experienced at like coincidental times. Like, is there anybody here when you're a kid and the light blows out? Like, maybe it's something, maybe it's not, but you can definitely explain that. Yeah, that's a process of a light bulb. But when you got a switch that if it actually makes connection in a situation where you're literally breaking that connection with the switch, and it was able to remake the connection, or water turning on, stuff like that, I would throw volume in there. Volume doesn't normally just go on and up and down. It's that's not, especially if you haven't had that problem before, for it just to start going up and down. The best thing I could think of in my head would be like if you push the remote or the button on TV so many times that it wore down enough that it would click, you clicked it in. But that would be like you pushing it and held it in, maybe turn the TV on and back off and the volume went up. But just randomly going on, up, I don't know, man. It's hard for me to like mechanically explain that one.
Yeah.
And that TV never had any problems before or since.
Not impossible.
Yeah,
But
I have no idea what caused it, but I know that in that moment, reading that book at that hour of night scared the shit out of me.
well, one
So
thing.
I stopped reading the book. I think I turned on cartoons and just tried to fall asleep.
Well, I was thinking
Looney
about,
Tunes.
Yeah,
you know, the
Yeah.
Amityville, the Amityville murder was investigated by Ed and Lorraine.
yeah.
Oh my
Freaking
God. Like this.
Ronald DeFeo Jr. You know, he murdered his family and then went in, and then later on, this other family moved in, right? And then they were haunted. When the
Yeah,
Warrens,
fam.
and the Warrens, yeah, exactly. When the Warrens investigated it, they didn't say that that the first set of murders. This was news to me. I was just researching over the week. They didn't say that the first murders were based off of possession or by being haunted. What they said was because of this horrible murder that this individual committed, that when something that horrible happens, it's like a magnetism for other negative, like, you know, demons or whatnot, whatever you want to call it, negative energy to the house. And then that possessed the house. And then when this new family moved in, they experienced, you know, what happened there. The movie Amityville Horror versus reality is very, very different.
Well, did any of you read the book?
I did not. You just chime in.
Amityville Horror. Yeah, I read the book. The book was it depends on which Amityville Horror version you saw. The one with Ryan Reynolds was definitely
I've seen both. I think we all have.
very, yeah, it was very more gore. The one
It's for Hollywood.
from the 70s was more kind of more typical paranormal, some psychological stuff going on there. I prefer the original from the 70s. That was more a little bit more truer to the book version of it. The book was good. But yeah, creepy house. You know, it's still up in the air whether or not that family was telling the truth, because I've heard that the families that have lived in that house since haven't had any issues with the house, haven't had any paranormal.
And that's what I'm saying.
thing. Yeah, and
Yeah.
and
That's
there
a
is,
big thing. I want to get
Yeah.
to that, all these different stories later too. Yeah.
yeah.
That's made me think of your story, Mr. Green, because when you have like an instance like that, and you know, I think those of us in the group here are I think we're all generally believers. And you have an instance like where, you know, if you're a kid, you're playing the Ouija board, or if you're older and you have a long discussion drinking
Pencils.
about, you know, ghosts or, you know, any of that kind of negative energy, and you basically, it's like you almost create a magnetism, or like, you know, open up like a window, or like for these, you know, I don't know, bored or just you seeking vulnerability type creatures are
Well,
seeking.
what you say it's negative energy.
I don't think it always is. I don't think it always is, but in this case specifically, but I think that both exist 100%.
Well, the Amityville thing I think is really like controversial because there's like the initial like case of it, and the look, I'm not going to be like expert on the Warrens or anything, but you know, I've read enough to be like, these guys, they might have had some things they experienced in some places for sure. But what I keep reading about is, man, they were smart. They want to get that money, right? And
What
so,
money?
you know, they could set up a situation where it's like, this could be a thing, right? Let's get some money out this. And maybe the people that are residents are like, man,
So
just leave me alone, right?
that's
You know, what I'm saying? But the Amityville thing, I don't know, man. I feel like because of the fact that since all that shit died down, it don't happen. Who knows? But then the quote unquote demonologists, right? That's like their whole thing is demonologists. Now, both of them very Catholic.
Yep.
And so let's remember that people of faith, like in that sense, they're more likely to kind of like buy into something. And who knows whether it's real or not, right? But I'm just saying, like, they're more susceptible, I guess, in some ways. And so if you're very Catholic,
yeah, Catholics
and
will
you,
anything.
right, exactly. And so, like, you know, the whole term demonologist, you know, think of that, right? I mean, they perceive that situation as some situation that's quote unquote negative or evil, and so we got to get rid of it. Now think of this
He
though.
invented it.
What if?
He invented the term?
Right, but what if, since them being there and all that stuff, they eradicated it? It really did happen, you know. So I'm not gonna like dismiss everything, but I don't know. It's kind of weird if you put that context, right?
It's hard when you
This
look
is
at it.
what
It's real easy. I think a lot, and there is a lot of parallels here with a lot of the paranormal stuff that we talk about in the reg here in the podcast. Is that like, you're gonna believe in what you believe based off your, for us, it's based off your, experiences, research, experience, what you've read, what seems logical, what doesn't seem logical, and it makes me hard to be 100% skeptic or 100% believer a lot of the time because I wasn't there when it happened. But one thing that they did emphasize when I watched a couple podcasts, and then I was reading this article about, like, it was a critic kind of basically breaking down how everything they said was bullshit. And in fact, most of the article felt like I was reading bullshit. But like one of the things that like I got out of it was they kind of like invited fame inadvertently at first. And they did write books. They did write what they said they were trying to make money off it. But as we all know, medium level book authors are not like, famous, like, I don't know what, at this time, Justin Bieber, Brad Pitt, or I don't know who, name anybody, right? But when
Those guys write books.
but when the Amityville case happened, they gained a lot of fame. And then when the Devil Made Me Do It case came out, and it became where they were actually discussing whether or not for it to be admissible in court that somebody could be possessed by the devil.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then they were crazy famous. And then the Conjuring movies, and we're talking about them now.
Yeah,
what's interesting to me about that shit is not that, like, and I read the case, and that one specifically, of all the cases, to me personally, is the one that I'm the least confident with as far as this timeline, because I mean, he had alcohol on board, and he stabbed his landlord. There was a dispute, but holy shit, if there is such a thing as possession, and that such thing is occurring in this world, it's a real fucking shame you get possessed.
Man, well, if you want to go down the possession path, you can get a whole nother realm of shit, right? But
Well, we can do a whole podcast on possession for sure.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of what we're going to be discussing tonight with Ed and Lorraine is based around possession, because pretty much every major case, including the Annabelle case, which is a case of a doll is possessed, is a case based around possession. Sorry.
To be specific, so like, okay, so like the Annabelle thing, right? We say, to us, the layman's, we're gonna say, oh, this thing is possessed. This doll was possessed, and Ed would classify it. No inanimate object or place can be possessed. It was
attached.
It was being not
it's attached, right? Like, it attached itself to it or something. Like, it's like
a demonic energy was using this item as its property, as like a vessel almost, but they don't classify that as a possession. So like all those artifacts that they got in their museum, thousands of shit from all these different cases, those aren't possessed. Those are just, those things were God damn it, what's the word?
Well, like at one point in time, what you're saying is like some entity took that physical object as a realm to exist in, right? And now that physical entity, the same doll, whatever the fuck, that thing don't exist in the doll no more.
It's right. You use it, right? It's like
it's like I don't know what the word is for that, but they used it as a
channel,
as a means.
There's a word. I know what you're talking about, Peter.
Possession is like if the demon's possessing somebody, they're manipulating their body, their actions, and they're getting it to act out whatever the demon is trying to accomplish, right? That's a possession.
Right.
Well,
it's different things. Yeah.
Yeah, with the physical objects, they use it more as a vessel.
Vessel. That's the word.
Vessel. There you go. So back to your
googling that shit, to be honest with you.
What's that?
I don't even like Googling it.
So
You gotta
back
be-
what I was saying,
Oh,
so as
thanks.
far as like the angle of like, oh, there's some money in this. So from all the different sources, it was constant that they didn't make any money off of any of their visits to any of these places. Whenever they would investigate any paranormal cases, they didn't collect any money. The only time they made money was on the backside in the case of if this becomes a movie or anything comes of it using their name and their practices to tell the story. That's when uh, they would get money for the likeness and their rights to their, you know, their life's work and their story. But just them going, they weren't charging people like, all right, it's going to be 10,000 to show up and 50,000 if we clear your house. Like there was none of that going on, which is crazy because that's heavy duty traveling. These dudes went all over the world, thousands of cases. And I mean, that was the story. It's been told in books. Their son-in-law, I think the guy that married their daughter is one of their biggest advocates right now who pushes their story. I think he runs their website.
Getting that money.
He does interviews. He did interviews with them. They had like a YouTube channel when Ed was still alive. And he tells it too, like they weren't collecting money until these movies were being made is when they actually started making money from it. So that's the crazy thing, like just out of pure passion, because she's this self-proclaimed clairvoyant. He deemed the term demonologist, and just out of a sheer passion because he grew up in a house that was haunted, that him and his brother believed to be haunted, and he found it so intriguing and wanted to get to the bottom, made it his life's work. If you can believe it's that pure and simple, it's just a passion project. But
Well, I know you mean there's the thousands, literally thousands and thousands of things they've done, right? But what
they said
bothers me,
cases of them visiting different households and
right? But what bothers me a little bit is like The Conjuring 2. Now, I'll have to admit, I ain't seen no Conjuring movies, but I can imagine.
You haven't seen any of them?
Nah, man, I don't really mess around with movies like that.
Oh, they're great movies, dude.
What
regardless of whether or not the stories were true, the Conjuring movies,
they're great movies.
Great movies. Really
yeah,
well.
It's still a movie.
And
I don't like fiction.
Well, you know,
Ed and
like
Lorraine Warren,
non-fiction.
Ed and Lorraine Warren are a lot hotter in the Conjuring movies than they were in real life.
Yeah, I know that one. The woman who played the woman, damn it, I can't think of their names, but she's the same
Lorraine?
woman who was in
Departed.
Quentin damn it, Martin
Departed,
Scorsese.
dude.
Yeah, Departed.
Yeah.
Her name's Vera Farmiga.
Smoking. At least in Departed. I don't know about The Conjuring, but
Well, the Conjuring 2 story, the Peggy Hodgson, like later on after that story, the kids did admit that some of the stuff they were doing, the tricks they were pulling, but they also said they weren't doing all of it. So basically, it's like these kids knew the house was haunted, they're going through these experiences, but because they were little kids and they got some attention for it, and they were grew up poor, and they're getting a lot of attention, that they maximized on that attention by increasing the amount of stuff that was going on, but that did not take away from the fact that stuff was actually happening in their house that they also experienced. So that's a lot of that's like, it was originally debunked, and then it was like, well, if it debunked it, it was debunked. The kids were like, yeah, we did all this crap, but we didn't do all of it, you know.
And that's one of the problems with the whole paranormal stuff is like right now, a lot of people make money off of it because they have a YouTube channel where they're like highlighting videos or something.
We're
and
doing
they are making a
podcasts
little bit of
about
money.
it, you know.
Yeah.
But there's a difference between like whether or not you're actually making money or just want attention. And even if you're not making money, especially Ed and Lorraine Warren back then, they still were getting attention.
They got a lot of attention.
But how about this? What was their jobs? How did they make money back then? What was their job?
They made money on books.
I honestly don't know if they had day jobs. Honestly,
I think that was their job.
I love it.
No, they didn't. They weren't well off, dude. They didn't make a lot of money. So here's what I've gathered. So let's kick it off with like a little backstory. So they met up when after he came back from the war. He was like in his early 20s, right?
They fought in World War II.
And
Yep.
when they met up and he realized, he started getting the notion that she was like clairvoyant, a medium, and he would tell her stories of him growing up in this just tormented him and his brother for I think like 6 or 7 years in his adolescence, from like age like I don't know, like 8 to 14 or like 6 to 13, something like that. And so that really kicked up these feelings that she had, because she tried to suppress them all these since she was like 9 years old, of seeing things, seeing spirits, seeing things around people in her life. And she tried to like push it down because she didn't want to be weird. So once he kind of got that hint, he told her that he was really into seeking out these haunted places and investigating them. It was just like so intriguing to him, right? So, but they didn't know where to start. They didn't, they're starting from scratch. So what they said was he went to art school. He started painting. So this is like from day one, to get their foot in the door. They would go to places, a house or a building that they heard had paranormal activity that was like documented. They go there, and he would stand outside and paint the place, give them a nice little outside painting, and then they'd go up, knock on the door, and she, being the lady, would be like, "Hey, my husband's a painter. He really likes your house. He made this nice painting for you." And they'd sell them for like $4, $5. And then they just mouthpiece it, and "Oh, we heard stories about this place, and is that true?" And then just kind of start asking questions, and then they started offering services like, "Oh, because they're religious stuff." I don't know. They might have been, selling them a little extra in the beginning, because I don't know how you tell somebody.
Keiko
For
now.
$5 back then,
I don't know
man,
what
you
they're
scroll it.
offering to help in the beginning. Maybe from the book, but that's how they started, just selling paintings. And he said they sold paintings for years at like $5, maybe up to $10 a piece, just barely getting by. Now back then, I forget when did they start doing this, in the early 60s? Like they didn't need much to get by, but they were just getting by. They weren't well off making big bucks off of this. This was surely merely just purely out of passion and wanting to help. That's their story.
Yeah, no,
But the Amityville, yeah. So when they stumbled upon Amityville in 74, I think, that's what really kicked off, because the murders, it was like in right here in the U.S., like that really put them on the map. TV, they were on shows, and then he started giving seminars and speaking about it, and he was getting paid small bucks to do that kind of stuff.
And in the book, the demonologist, it's been so many years since I've read the book, but I want to say, if my memory serves me right, that they did do investigations on like government property, military bases. Like they would be invited quietly to these places to do investigations, and you just kind of wonder I wonder what the chain of events would be when you have some military officer in a meeting saying, what, some weird shit's going on. Let's just call these people over and let them do a little investigation, see if they find anything. I just wonder, it from a military perspective, how that would go down, and if that would even go down today.
Nah.
For that to occur, it wouldn't be like, hey, Private Snuffy back at the barracks said, he heard like, some weird stuff, right? That would be like freaking 30 or 40 people had issues, and then like, Lieutenant so-and-so went and checked it out, and he saw something, everybody's seen something. It's actually now starting to cause an issue of people going to train in this area or something like that. For something like that to happen, where they actually call anybody to even look into it and not just be like them laughing it off. If those cases are true, would definitely have to be like a lot of witnesses, and like it's causing an actual detriment to training or something like that. So that's
Yeah.
pretty interesting. I didn't know about that.
Yeah, what I want to say is like both these guys, the husband and wife, they're both quote unquote self-taught in many ways, right? They have no formal education. They have no, I'm expert in this field. I'm not a expert in science and physics or whatever the fuck, right? They're just self-proclaimed people. And one person, the wife, self-proclaimed person who can communicate with spirits and stuff, right? The husband, self-proclaimed demonologist. So to me, sometimes I feel like the credibility is really weird, and the coincidental stuff is like, what are they looking for? If you in that world and that's your belief system, you're gonna look for it, right? But if you're not in that belief system, you're not gonna look for it. Now, obviously, I've had many experiences myself with stuff, and I'm not gonna dismiss it, but I do feel like in any field, if I'm gonna go look for something, I'm gonna find it, right? And so, you know, there's just, to me, I feel like they had an agenda and they knew what they wanted to find, and their agenda brought them to certain circumstances, and your mind can do crazy shit on you,
Well,
you know?
the flip side of that is that, like we've talked about this before, but you got your cones and rods in your eyes, and then the interpretation of like the anatomy of your eye of everything you see right now. So looking around a room right
It's
now.
upside down.
Yes, right. Yes, right. And then I see everything I see. I know that there's a couch here. I know that there's a table here. I know these things are here. So as I'm looking, there are millions, maybe billions of particles of information that are being transferred into my eye. When it transfers into my eye, it goes into my brain, and then it is processed, right? We all know that. So one of the theories is with like people seeing UFOs, other paranormal shit, is that you're actually more likely to see something that is there of paranormal nature, that if you believe it's possibility to see. So for instance, like seeing a ghost, that if you don't believe in ghosts wholeheartedly, that we pull millions of particles of information into our eyes, and our brain can only process something in the tens of thousands of those particles of information. So if you don't believe it's there, you actually physically won't see it. They've done studies on this where they could like put like things next to your bed when you wake up in the morning. Like you can take your nightstand and change it and put a different nightstand there, and that you won't actually even see the color change of your nightstand. That was one specific one, because basically your brain expects to see what it's going to see, and it believes what's there, and you can only interpret so much of the information. I mean, have you ever like looked for your keys for like an hour and then found them in a spot that you checked 3 times already?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Yeah, but your
what?
brain also fills in the gaps. There's many missing
Brain
spots.
fills
That's
in
my
gaps all-
that's my exact point. Is your brain fills up in the gaps on what it believes is what it believes is there, right? Versus what could actually be there, because it can't interpret all the information, so it's filling gaps in. So yeah, so you say at one point, like if you're looking for something, your brain can play tricks on you. Yeah, granted, absolutely. There's such a thing as paranoid schizophrenia, and there's like legit hallucinations, and anybody's had psilocybin has seen things that weren't there, etc. Right? So that's absolutely possible. But on the same token, I think the flip side of that is that if you are looking for it, you are still more likely to see it if it is there, because believing it's possible, it'll be less likely your brain would fill in the gaps, for instance, with the wall instead of an apparition. You know what I mean?
Wait, what are you saying? If you believe it's possible,
Mhm.
then
then
I
you're
would
more
expect that your brain would fill in the gaps with what you believe is possible.
That's what I'm saying. Is if you don't believe that ghosts are possible at all, just use ghost example because it's part of the conversation. If you don't believe they're possible at all, then when your brains can only interpret a certain percentage of what you're seeing, you won't see it. Physically won't see it because you don't believe it's possible and your brain's filling in the gaps of what you're visually seeing. Versus if you believe it's possible, you're more likely to actually see it. And that's a physical thing. That go like they've done the experiments they've done that have obviously not been paranormal. Experiments they've done on that have been people who are like, and that brings me like you think about like Lorraine being clairvoyant. And like the movies perpetualize it to this level of like legit psychics seeing things.
Yeah.
But I personally believe that there are people that are more sensitive to it and
Yeah.
more likely to see things and not see things. And there's a line there somewhere. I don't know where it's at scientifically, but there's a line on what is humanly possible to be more sensitive to,
Yeah.
for a lot of things. And a lot of times psychics are actually more sensitive in a lot of things, even though they're not psychic like they're saying they're psychic, but they're more likely to like be able to read people's like micro movements and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I think that when I think of psychic to me or think of like clairvoyant human beings to me, I don't think of like somebody sitting there reading your palm and saying, hey, you're gonna like die in a bicycle crash in like 19 or 2042. I think of somebody who's like maybe a little more likely to be able to just pick up on small things.
Yeah, I don't like the word psychic so much because I don't think people are psychic. I definitely have medium, clairvoyant. I feel like they sit in this middle ground of places or realms that most of us aren't, and they sense things. Like you said, they're definitely more sensitive. They feel energy different, and so like don't get hung up on like these. Oh, I'm a demonologist expert or a psychic expert. The expert thing, that don't even matter. That's just, I don't even know if they would even say that, but it's just learning on the job, boots on the ground, and going off of all their past cases of experience building. Because yeah, like you're not taught this stuff. They're just proclaiming it to be as they've learned previously. So they're just learning as they go. But they're the only, at the time, they're the only ones in the field doing this work to this extent and this in depth, like hands on, days at a time, weeks at a time, sometimes months at a time. They're the only ones doing it. So, like, yeah, they're ahead of the game. They got the corner market, or they got the market corner. So, I don't know about the whole.
Or they're
I
just
don't
a
know about the
shaman.
demon. I don't know about the demonologist shit. Like, I don't know how. I think he's the
Well,
only
if
one
you
willing to go head first. He's the only one that ever performed an exorcism outside of like official clergy. Like only clergymen are allowed to do that. And I think I don't think he pulled the one off in The Conjuring like they show. I think they said he actually didn't do that one, but he did perform one at least. I think maybe two in his time. But I don't think he was the one that did the exorcism.
I mean,
look, if you want to go down exorcism world, like and it's all consistent with all this stuff, right? Let's just say there's all
But you
these
got to relate it to
energy.
even the UFO. There's no experts on UFOs. It's very linear. It's just there's some people have more knowledge than others, but don't get hung up on the whole expert thing.
I mean,
No,
if those
there's
guys were
definitely gonna be experts
if
on
those guys were
UFOs.
seeking out, hey, Mr. Green, don't worry about your guest. I can censor her out if she likes, no big deal. Hey, if you want to talk about like just like think about, I like think about, they had thousands of cases that they were seeking out paranormal shit. They had to have seen some shit, dude. Like, like if you believe if you believe in ghosts and the existence of ghosts, and they spent their lives, I'm sure they went to a lot of places. I mean, we know Conjurings is completely Hollywoodized, if that's even a word, but there is a point in the movie it makes, even though it's just a movie, where they're exploring a house and they figure out that it's like the echoes from like the pipes in the attic, and they're showing them why that makes sound. Now, this is just a movie, but I bet you, especially after they've gained the experience of going to all these different places, that they like would go to some houses and be like, hey, just so you know, when the wind blows at the corner of your house,
Yeah.
you have that willow tree right there. It's gonna sound like howling, you know, and you know, etc.
Right,
They
right.
they ruled out shit a lot. After that Amityville thing, when they got put on the map and they were started to get calls requesting them, dude, they were turning down stuff over the phone, simply ruling it out with 5 questions they'd ask the person, because they'd call and say, "Oh, can you come check? I'm having this problem and it does this at night," like you were saying, Matt, making a noise, and they would ask them 5 questions and be like, "It's simply this, sweetheart. It's not." They were turning down stuff left and right because their rule of thumb was they have to rule out physical, uh, any kind of physical reasoning or any logical, practical reasons any of this could happen. They had a set of rules they'd go by before they actually dig into and classify this. Okay, this is something out of the ordinary, paranormal, that we need to look into. But they were ruling shit out left and right because they were getting calls and cases nonstop after the Amityville thing. They didn't show up to everything.
Man, all I know is if you're gonna be a self-proclaimed demonologist, that's me. You wake up one day and said, "That's who I am. That's what I do." Right?
You'd have to do the work though before you would even. I mean, you could say it's
What work?
arrogant. You have to do the work before you.
I mean, but hold on. Let's just think. Let's just say it's real. Let's just pretend it's real. And I'm a demonologist. I'm a fucking self-proclaimed. I'm the guy. I'm the fucking guy who'll figure that shit out. Then let's just think of the implications. Okay. What are the implications? There is a difference between some type of energy and some other type of energy where you can measure it where this is bad and this is good, quote unquote, right? Oh, what is the opposite of demonologist? I don't know. Niceologist? I really don't know, right? But then that would exist, right? So why you see what I'm going here? Energy is energy, and associating energy with good or evil is an idea that we put onto that. And so good and evil energy, it's just energy. And you associate with us because we have emotions that somehow this is good and this is bad. Shit exists. And that's it.
All right. So for ologists in general, a study of, right? They're like a student of, right? So like if someone's a demonologist specifically, you wouldn't have to frame it's the most extreme case of demonologist in this case would be somebody who's actually involving themselves with like exorcisms or that or dealing with the demon in general. Someone can easily be a student of something. There is so much history based off of demonology. You go back thousands of years, right?
Witchcraft.
Well, dude, I mean, all of the paranormal, like there's thousands of years of literature and history and experience involved in a study. And if he studied it enough, just like somebody who's a ufologist does not have to be somebody who's literally had an experience with the UFO. It's somebody it's study of, right? Study of to an extent where they understand it, they've studied everything has to do with UFOs. That could be, it's like a biologist, right? A biologist, same thing, study of biology. Criminologist, right? It's not a criminal, it's a study of criminal.
I'm not saying the guy is evil.
No, what I'm saying is that for him to be a demonologist, for him to proclaim that, he would not have had to have been involved in exorcism or even seen a demon. He could proclaim being a demonologist and be reasonable to do so just by having studied at a certain quantity of information based off of what is known as demonology in our world.
But that's my point. What is demonology?
So
demonology, you have to associate negative type of connotation with that, right? Well, that's demon. It's not like you're an angel expert or some shit, right? There's some kind of
like a what's the study of religion? Not theocracy, theology. Theologist would be somebody specifically studying religion. I mean, we're kind of like honing in on this one word, but for him to say that, I don't think that that's unreasonable if he had spent enough time studying it to where.
Well, I don't think it's honing in on one I think that word plays a huge role in this conversation, is because that word is the way they
Well,
describe
I don't
himself
know. You
as.
get hung up on the title, regardless.
But the title means something, and the title entails what your whole philosophy about what you're doing actually is, right? And so the whole point is that you associate bad energy and good energy,
Which
and
we don't really
where's
know
the in
much
between
about.
energy, that kind of stuff. So there's certain things that are implied, I guess, is my point, by doing these types of aspects, these types of studies. And I'm not going to say it exists or doesn't, but what is it that you investigate that is not demonology?
Well,
What's the other part?
look at this with a causation, right? If you're gonna talk about energy, good energy and bad energy, it's like, yeah, it exists in this world, but it's definitely a difference in,
Well,
like, you gonna say something there, Pete?
You can recognize. So, like you're saying, the alternative good energy. Good energy is like children are good energy, laughter.
Serotonin release.
We can recognize those things.
It's still an
Those aren't
observation by a
foreign to us.
human
Good
being.
energy. We know what a good time is.
Very
But,
theoretical, right?
right, but when they come across something that shakes them, terrifies them, that they're not used to, and they can't identify, they call on to these people who start to build a knowledge of patterns and shit, and they I don't know how you know how to deal with. I don't know how they figured out how to deal with certain things. Maybe that's where Lorraine came in, because she she felt what she felt, and that probably aided, Ed. And I don't know how you perform these certain things, but when people don't know, they don't know, and they don't recognize what they're seeing or what they're feeling, the experience they're having in their house, and they're like, we know what the word haunted is as a kid. I don't know how far back that word goes, but when you don't know what to do with it because you've never experienced it, we've all experienced good, positive love, happiness. When you experience that shit, that's terrifying, because it doesn't happen to everybody. They don't know what the fuck to do. So they call this guy somewhere down the road. He calls himself a demonologist because he wrote a couple books. But I don't think that negates like their work, their practices. I really don't care about his title as much. I guess that doesn't bother me.
Well,
Yeah,
it's like they
that's not
believe
what
they believe in the personification of of this energy, and I mean, like, who's really to say? But they 100% believe in the personification of this energy. Like, is not just energy floating around. Like there is, like, we're all made up of energy, but they believe in, like, is a personification of it, right? Like a demon, right? So when you look at
bad and good.
their relationship was basically one of a historian of a sense, right? Somebody who's read all the lore, looked for what wasn't bullshit in it. He's read everything he could read about exorcism and everything like that, and understands this realm of it. I wouldn't call it objective, but objective in pertaining to what has been the literature, right? And then you have somebody who's able to not necessarily tap in like a palm reader per se, but somebody who's able to maybe get a sense earlier on that, hey, this is a bad place, maybe be able to get a sense in certain, like, geographical locations of a house or this or that this is the problem area, just by getting, like, the hairs in the back of their neck standing up. Dude, I've read stories, especially in combat, pre-ambush, where guys have had their hair standing up in the back of the neck. I have a buddy who was hunting one time and woke up and his hairs were standing in the back of his neck. And then he walked up the road and there were cougar tracks. I've heard a lot of stories like this that make me really believe that there is a sense that we have, and people like to call it a sixth sense, whatever, but it's
Yeah.
a sense of survival. And my belief is that this is based off of your brain picking up micro details, right, that you're not processing, right? Like, for instance, say you were sleeping, say you were in the area of a predator and you could smell it, but you didn't really recognize the smell, and you kind of knew, like, you were kind of in a bad spot that normally would be prey at. And all this is kind of based off evolutionally, but I'm tongue tied. And that you're picking up these micro details, and then some people are better at picking up these micro details than other people.
But dude, that is different, because that fucking creature is existing with you physically right now. right? It's different than saying some person who died 80 years ago or whatever the fuck is somehow their energy is still there. To me, that's different. To me, it's like,
You might be able
well,
to pick up on that though. I mean,
well,
my
but
wife.
then you're now saying that that energy after you die, and I don't know, probably we all seen someone die at some point, right? I know I have, but that whole thing, stuff happens. And you go look up some information about the actual physical studies about when someone dies, what happens to their weight change, their mass. You measure them. There is this number,
21 grams, right?
right? 20 something. Fuck, I can't remember the
21
number.
grams.
21, right? And so that's a thing. There's a lot of studies that suggest something, but now that's a tiny number in terms of the grand scale. But if you think there is some energy that entails your existence that exists, it shouldn't weigh that much, right? That's a little amount. But in terms of energy, that's kind of seems like a lot of amount. And so I guess I'm still stuck on this whole bad versus good shit because I really am kind of upset about this because then you say there's this one side and another side, but then how can that be? Shouldn't there be a spectrum? And people associate bad and good with this and that, and it's like I'm gonna do an exorcism, and how you know you're not like schizophrenic and that kind of shit, you know?
It's not as simple, dude. It's out of our realm of understanding. There's,
but it's not binary, you know?
Right. Okay. Well, hey, look. Yeah. How about the philosophy of aesthetics? Right. I mean, that's like one that's always fascinated me. Like, there's a legitimate study of aesthetics and philosophy where you look at something that's beautiful and look at something that's ugly, and then everybody's like, "Oh, it's all the eye of the beholder." Well, it's actually not true. There's a very solid argument. It's like a
Mona Lisa.
argument. There's a solid post-Socratic argument that there is a legitimate science to aesthetics. That's the same sort of thing with good and evil to me. I think the same thing. Look, when I do. So when you look at like psychopaths and sociopaths and stuff like that, so it's a little gray.
I'm looking at them right now.
Yeah. Right.
Hi.
You sure are, man. I'll tell you what. But I mean, like, I hate bringing up extreme examples because you gotta be the extreme guy, right? But what evil is. We all know what evil is. There is an objective evil. There's such a thing. Like here's an example. It's a cliche example. We look at Auschwitz, when they were splitting people up into the concentration camps, and they'd let the men and the strong women go one line, right, and they'd actually go to the work camp, and then the weaker women, the old, and the children were going to a pit. They throw them in a pit that they had gasoline in and watch them burn. That's an evil act. We know it is. We know that's an evil act. How do we know? Well, I mean, it's not really an easy thing to define. Taking a knife and burying it into a child in front of you, that's an evil act. That's an evil act. Now, is it easy to make it to define an objective spectrum to this? Absolutely not. But there is an existing spectrum, and I'm sure philosophically, I mean, even Nietzsche would agree that there's such thing as evil, and he's our big pessimist, right? So, looking at it from that perspective, and if we relate that to energy, you can argue I could argue pretty confidently that there is such a thing as negative and positive energy. I mean, negative and positives are everywhere in science, right?
Wait. Hold up. We're humans. We have special capability of contemplating certain ideas. Let's take a look at a certain species of toads, big ass motherfucking toad.
I knew you're gonna
frog things.
Argument. Everybody always
look. Think about it. I want to talk about cannibalism.
Baby deer. All right, go for it.
So certain animals, they're gonna eat each other. Let's think about the lion. I'll show you. I'll eat this little baby ass lion right here. Some frogs out in Australia, I think it was New Zealand, maybe somewhere out there. I don't want to say for sure, but
big frogs, but go ahead.
They have no predators, so they eat each other. Okay, now if we ate each other, that's a big time problem, right? That is no.
That's a taboo right
That
there.
is a no-no, big time, right? But see, I feel like our intellectual capacity and our emotional capacity gets sometimes fogged in our understanding of nature, in the sense that we put attributes towards certain actions. We say, that's bad, that's good. And like you said, it's an intuitive feeling. And most of us feel that intuitive feeling. But when shit came down to it, we live in this fucking world where I just go buy the sausage at the store, right? I just go buy the yogurt, whatever the hell. If I'm starved to death, I'm about to eat you, fool.
All right,
Go get up.
let me
We're
counter
getting
your
off
argument.
No, but it's all, it has to do with everything. Our, you know,
All right, so
our
what about,
perception.
like-
Alex Jones says the frogs in Florida are transgender.
Is that Florida? Can't remember.
He says it all the time. Homo frogs in Florida.
And there you go.
There's a in cultural anthropology we discussed like cultural health, right? And when you look at cultural health, there were certain signs that a culture was dying, and then it would be the end of that culture. And like infanticide was one, geriatricide was another, sexual acts towards children. There's like a list of them. But when those acts are becoming acceptable within the culture, that the culture would essentially die over a period of time afterwards. And that's been studied. And that's the thing. So I don't know. I think the consciousness plays a big role in it, man. I think consciousness does. And then with the question would be that, is it evil? Is it only evil because we're conscious of it, and it wouldn't be evil if we weren't conscious of it? Or is it evil if it's not evil regardless of the fact that we're conscious? Because that's a huge part of it. Because our consciousness gives us the ability to decipher what we believe to be good and evil. But a lot of that shit, man, a lot of that shit is not based off a cultural taboo. This is a very big philosophical argument. It seems like every time I've ever taken
Very
a
philosophical, for sure.
class, it turns into like, if you had two kids and you're at the gate of a at a fucking Auschwitz,
Train is coming.
you get your gun and shoot one of the kids. Which kid are you gonna shoot? What's the right answer? All right, Ed and Lorraine. Colin.
I want to real quick. I want to join the skeptic side for a second. So
Don't.
we'll give you this. I'm thinking about it like
whole last 20 minutes backing you up, and you're
So I will give you this. So let's say they got called in for a lot of cases, and a lot of them they dismissed. A lot of them they refused over the phone. You could say, as a skeptic, I would say, I bet they would, kind of like a hotshot lawyer. You want a success rate. Maybe they took on cases that maybe they felt, oh, this is an easy slam dunk. There's nothing even really here. We could pretend, burn some sage, and eliminate some things, and it'd be a closed case, like, a win, maybe to build their name, build their resume, get their, oh, they helped us out and they got a success rate now. Maybe they were doing that. Because a lot of it, there's a lot of skeptics that slam them about even the parent house from Conjuring 1, and then
Parent Trap.
There's a couple different houses where they went there, they either performed their extraction, maybe even exorcisms. There's families for generations would move in and they would experience stuff. Another family would come, they would still experience stuff. There's so many people that didn't want to live in these houses. But if you ask the lady that lives in that parent house today, that farmhouse, never heard a single thing, never had an issue. She's sick of people coming, trying to see the Conjuring house, stay off the property. It was such a hoax. They're phony. She never hears nothing, sleeps like a baby at night. There's a couple different instances that the Warrens have worked at. Current residents, not a problem. Previous residents have had stories and issues as well. But a lot of the current ones are like, nothing happens. It's a bunch of bullshit. Now you can say maybe the Warrens were successful extraditing any paranormal entity, and that's why there's no current activity. But a lot of people living in the current situation don't experience anything. So maybe it was bullshit.
Yeah, you wonder if like if the entities attach themselves to people and if they have like an amount of time in which they do it, like to like test the vulnerability on the individual. You know what I mean? So if you have like a negative entity, whatever you want to call it, I'll call it demons for some guy. So we have a demon here. His name's Bob. He's a real dickhead, dude.
You fucking asshole.
This fucker Bob. He like he sees little fucking Sally at this house who's vulnerable, who's super vulnerable, and it's a house has a lot of abuse, and tries to, you know, get possess her or just fuck with her wherever he does. And for some reason or another, it's unsuccessful. Let's move on to the next fucker. It's possible. I mean, we're gonna start doing on the list of possibilities, but I mean, I agree with you. It's and you wonder. You wonder about a lot of these, and it's also like when you look at the Warrens, we spend, when we converse about it, we spend 90% of it talking about Arnie, Cheyenne, the Perron case for Perron or Perron case, the fucking first Conjuring, and then the Hodgkins in the second Conjuring, and so we're looking at the Conjuring movies. Basically, I just named the 3 Conjuring movies, and like those are and then the Amityville, of course, right? So those are the 4 cases that we talked about. And I tell a group that has thousands of cases, and that's what majority of people are going to talk about, and so those are the ones that are going to be picked apart. I do want to talk about the Cheyenne one. Do you guys familiar with that at all? With the Devil Made Me Do It case?
I haven't seen the movie, but
I have not either.
Slightly familiar with it.
They talk about the book.
I saw the movie, but
yeah, I believe.
Oh shit from it, honestly. I can't remember the story.
I really want to go and reread that book now.
I'm gonna fuck it up, but I give you the quick notes. Is in I believe it was the name of it was this the son of the family was possessed. The Warrens went there and got the Catholic Church involved for the
there you go.
exorcism. I believe the Catholic Church finished the exorcism, and at the end of the exorcism, when it was at like peak stress, when the kids are suffering, Arnie says, who's a stepdad or the boyfriend of the wife, I can't remember if he's a stepdad or the boyfriend or fiance or whatever, but that's his role basically, says, this is too much, I can't take it, just possess me, take me. And subsequently the exorcism ends, and kind of at that point or soon afterwards. And the theory being that basically, the way the rules work for this sort of thing, he invited the demon into himself.
Yeah.
Well, then what happened to him afterwards?
So over the course of months,
chopped his dick off.
He had a lot of experiences. They said
his dick off.
No. He spoke in tongues at times. He had a lot of times when he would wake up and he'd be in other places. Like he had these like long periods of not knowing what was going on. Like he'd basically like black out, wake up, like someone else was running his body for a while. And then he had a dispute with his landlord later on, ended up stabbing his landlord to death. So when this happens, great news. Obviously Lorraine.
Great news.
Big news.
Oh, I think so. Great news.
Humongous, huge news.
Great.
The Warrens were involved in the initial possession, so they come back and they talk to him and do all their investigating, and they're like, this guy's possessed and this happened at the possession. It was possessed. So obviously he goes, court and this and that.
Salem witch trial.
Believes he didn't do it, believes he doesn't remember doing it, believes he's possessed, he didn't have control over his body, he was doing that's his big argument. So they push real hard to put possession by the devil, to push it in a court of law. End result is the judge does not admit it, but the Warrens were involved in it. And this is where basically the line is drawn with the Warrens on if you believe that they're snake oil salesmen or the real deal trying to help people, because the argument on the snake oil standpoint is that they were literally just trying to maximize their publicity, and that they took an opportunity, and this would have been the biggest thing since sliced bread for demonology if they were able to prove in a court of law that his guy was possessed by the devil and he committed this murder, yada yada. And so that's where most of the critics attack first, is the specific case. Anyways, he ended up getting, I think, 10 to 20 years because it was manslaughter. I think it was a confrontation. I don't think he wasn't like first degree murder. And he ended up getting out in 5 years, and he's out of jail. And this is,
Yeah.
I'm gonna.
What's he doing now?
It was in the 80s. No idea. Probably, hopefully not stabbing people. But this is the case. The Arnie.
How about this?
Arnie Shines. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, people been living a long, long time. Civilized human beings randomly pop up in the middle of nowhere thousands of years ago, where the fuck, right? Guess what? The same shit that motherfucker therapists be saying nowadays is this thing or that thing or this, you got this. They never had that shit for a long, long, long time. Right?
Okay, but hey, look, you got 330 million Americans, and then how many, a billion Chinese, and they like hundreds of millions of people around the world. And that we know there's borderline personality disorder. We know there's schizophrenia. We know that there's all these manic depressive disorders, psychopaths. So we know that all these.
Yeah, classify them into things that we don't even know if it's a thing.
But I guarantee you, not everyone. I mean, I know you have a therapist very close to you. And I mean, not everyone, but I guarantee you, of the millions and millions of people, and out of the hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people that are seeking therapy, that there are cases where maybe it's not recognized as a possession or as something paranormal specifically, but at least that clinician was like, holy fuck, what the fuck was that? And perhaps because it's so unbelievable, and this kind of refers back to UFOs, because I guarantee you, there's people like us who are believers, but there's probably 60-70% of the world are skeptics. And if my neighbor came up to me and I was a skeptic and said I saw a UFO last night, the skeptic's going to be like, you probably saw a drone or something, even though they may have really seen a UFO. And that's where these sorts of things came buried. I mean, it's the famous saying, right? The greatest trick the devil ever pulled, right?
I don't know, man. I think that the UFO and spiritual stuff is very different. I feel like the UFO is a physical thing. I mean, shit, I'm not gonna go down the whole realm, but
you walked in a room and saw a kid levitating. That's a physical thing, right? Like,
well,
what the fuck?
Give me a famous one of that, because
each one of these cases supposedly had multiple with levitation.
Most people are skeptic until some shit happens that they can't explain, and now they're like, I need help.
Well, the thing I want to make sure y'all understand, I've had a lot of things happen to me paranormally, death, suicide, all kinds of crazy ass shit in my life. And I've seen some shit. And I'm the first one to say I'll be sympathetic to you. I just feel like these Warrens took their little realm to another level to exploit shit. I really do. That's just the feeling I get. I don't get really good evidence from that shit. And who knows? Maybe all this shit is just in our mind anyways. We project what we expect, and it happens, and who knows?
Do you believe people can move things with their mind?
Wait, what?
Do you believe people can physically move things? Like, if I have the power and I hone it, I can make a
oh yeah,
table and chairs like slide across the room.
I don't know what the hell that's called. I forget. Not telekinesis, but something like that, right?
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah, that's a thing.
Telekinesis, because kinesis, right, is like controlling energy, right? So it's like it's like it whatever. Let's tele like sight of energy.
Hella
telephone.
You got that hella telekinesis, baby.
I'm just wondering. And I'm sorry I had to step out there for a minute. I got distracted.
No excuse.
I'm just wondering. I'm kind of in the middle of the road. But if you are someone who is a heavy skeptic, what evidence would you have to be presented to actually believe? Because there's a lot of evidence, if you want to go deep enough,
Have to see it,
online, a
man.
lot of video, a lot of photos. But even if you actually saw it, at what point would a hardcore skeptic actually believe that what they saw was something paranormal?
It might not ever happen, I
Yeah.
think, with these skeptics sometimes, right? You could always find a way to disexplain the other side.
I don't know.
But no, with
Please
these heavy
explain.
skeptics, for sure, they'll find a way, right?
Oh yeah, I thought you meant you.
No, I'm saying
Yeah.
like, and I'll see, let's just say you're a skeptic as a motherfucker, right? And you're like,
Mhm.
I seen Grandma Joe or whatever.
I've seen it.
I seen them. I heard everything you said. But they're like, oh, well, one night, wake up in the middle of the night, I seen some shit, right? Oh, I'm dreaming. There's always some excuse. And so I get it. I get the skepticism, but I do believe that for sure there is shit that we don't understand that's happening. And I'm not gonna say for sure it's like, oh, there's this afterlife and all this stuff. It might just be an interconnectedness of everything that's ever happened. And until then, the Warrens, self-proclaimed demonologists. I don't like that label. That makes me not like it.
That's such a weird one to me. Not like, I'm gonna be honest with you.
But so a fun question. Out of all of us, which would be the number one place that you would personally want to investigate?
Haunting wise?
Yeah,
Oh, the albinos.
besides your house.
Fuck.
Oh shit.
Up on Hicks Road.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't want to sleep in any of those houses.
But let's I'm gonna give you $5,000 tonight. You're gonna go up there in the hills. You're gonna tent it up, man. Chill. You gonna do it? $5,000
I've
bucks?
Oh,
driven
yeah,
up
I
there.
would, dude. I've slept up there before, man. I have done it.
Yeah.
I
Oh,
drove
the
an
Hicks
albino
Road
home.
hills? Yeah, that
The fucking Hicks Road.
that don't scare albinos. Don't scare
The
me at all.
albinos,
Bro. Albinos
for
do
real,
shit like
dude.
this.
I
I
drove
hope
one
you
of
give
those
me
motherfuckers home
$5,000
once.
for that, dude. Give me $5,000. Give me $1,000 if I was in town.
Give me
Yeah.
$5.
I could use $1,000 right now, dude. To be honest with you.
Yeah, say
No,
I'll do that.
I don't
I'm
think I'd
actually-
sleep in the Amityville house though.
I'm actually wondering. I know we were talking about the concentration camps earlier, but out of all the ghost hunter shows, paranormal shows, I haven't seen, or at least I don't remember any of them ever doing any paranormal investigations at any concentration camps. I'm not sure if it's some.
What about the
Yeah.
Gettysburg?
Gettysburg has been interesting, but I would love to put up a camera in one of the gas chambers.
Oh, dude, they're probably
and-
like clauses, man. That stuff's off limits, probably.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
I mean,
like,
you could walk into a certain point, and then beyond that, I don't think that you can actually walk fully in. But imagine if you had just you can go up in there, put a bunch of recorders, put a
I
bunch
knew
of
somebody that walked in. I think it was Dog Cow. You can go in. I think it's Dog
Well,
It's-
I mean,
you
you have to
gotta have
remember
some
a lot
dark
of those
energy,
bodies
bro.
they just threw in fucking big ass trenches.
yeah, but still
Burying that
the leftover residue, something's got to be thick in there, And even if it's for a night, I would just want to just be
I'm not
curious.
a big fan of the mushy stuff, but I've heard stories from dudes I know were not like crybabies who've gone to those and have had to hold back from weeping. I think that the emotion is so strong.
It's
with
it's
the
a dark energy in those places.
I think that
Shit.
what happened is so unbelievable.
There's
All
some
I know-
podcasts. There's some
All I know-
podcasts. Oh shit. There's some ones about like battlefields, Gettysburg, and wherever the hell a lot of the Civil War was happening. I think they call it like blood mud or blood soil,
Hmm.
where people have gone out there and try to get recordings. There's a lot of heavy energy at all those places.
When you look-
Anywhere there was a lot of death out of anger, death out of fear, it stays for a while.